Good afternoon, everybody. Photographic prints will be the fossils of the future relics that are a strong part of our past, but we slowly relinquish with the time. We will be survived by prints that become redundant as a medium because of the digitization of photography. These relics will tell our stories when we are not around to tell them ourselves. Through some of her recent works, Nivedita Gupta looks deeper into a post photography future by way of physically destroying or distorting these relics. By intervening in the decay of photography, she intends to facilitate the fossilization of photography. Welcome to KRVIA.
Hi, thank you for having me. Hello.
You can go ahead and share your screen, Nivedita.
Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
All right. I don't think I can make this larger. Is that visible? I'm not sure if the presentation is visible.
Yes, we can see it.
All right. Perfect. So whenever you guys are ready.
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here and to discuss some of my recent work with students at Kamla Raheja. And I've always admired people who have graduated from this college because I have known a lot of architects who graduated from Kamla Raheja, and I can proudly say they are some of my closest friends. So kudos on that. And this is a great opportunity because I get a chance to show you guys some of my new work. And it may not be completely commercially aligned, but I hope you guys enjoy it. So this is a presentation called What Still Remains. And I have taken the liberty to make a slight play on the word still because whenever we think of photography, we think of still images and nothing that moves or is animated. And that extends to the way a photographic print is and also to the way we look at pictures online, because these are images that we look at online for a very brief moment of time, and then the amount that they may register on us is not something that we can decide because of the oversaturation of images that we see everywhere around us, especially since more and more people are online and in a time like this, which is a post-pandemic time. So what still remains is my little initiative or project initiative, which is to combine or to think about what I've been doing in terms of photography over the past few years and also more recently during the pandemic, and how it has naturally gravitated towards the death of photography, which is just I don't mean to say that I believe that photography is dead, but I do believe that there is so much of photography now all around us that somehow a lot of meaning gets lost when we are looking at pictures online. It can be of architecture or it can be of anything else. And as more and more of these photographs become something that can be viewed online or in any digital medium, I think we're moving further away from the photographic print, which is the physical, tactile embodiment of an image that is probably part of all of our childhood nostalgia, but you can say is not really part of our present memorabilia for anyone. So, what can happen to these photographic prints in the future is something that is an interesting question to me, because it could be said that we hold dear to these prints and we try to protect them and we try to indulge in our nostalgia by collecting more and more of these photographic prints and facilitating a medium to see more of these photographic prints like exhibitions where they can be displayed. But also we could go down a path where these prints are kind of lost from our collections or from our memory over time, and they kind of become like fossils that can be found objects that are discovered by future civilizations, which are androids or humanoids, but are basically traces that were left behind by our generation that could not be preserved properly, but will tell our stories when we are not around to tell them ourselves anymore. So there is some work that I'd like to share, which is kind of a collection of the way I've been looking at the death of photography and how I have been taking the photographic print and distorting in different ways to make fossils out of it. So I'll just start now. The first project that kind of triggered this whole idea for me was called Old Shadows of a New Light, which was 3 years ago in Spain, which is when I went to Spain to do a master's in photography. But what I carried with me was a very little body of architecture photography work that were images that I had taken maybe during my internship or maybe during my travels while I was interning in another city in India. And there was very little that I could do with them in terms of trying to get a starting point for creating a body of work which is worthy of a master's in fine art photography. But then I started looking at the images more carefully, or maybe I looked at them too long. And there were some instances like this, for example, a photograph taken in Auroville, India in 2015, which is a school designed by an architect based out of Auroville. And the more I looked at it, the more it seemed like there is a composition within this composition that spoke more about three-dimensionality, but when you print it out, might look more abstract and might look more ambiguous than what the building represents. So I got interested in trying to bring in more ambiguity and more abstraction into all the images that I had been clicking in Spain or I had come with from India. And that is what I tried to build on, which is a whole set of images. And I'll just run through them, that on further abstraction or on looking further seemed like images in themselves. And all of these that I'm kind of running through now are part of bigger images that I did not want to concern myself with anymore. So in a way, I did not want to hold on to my old work, and I wanted to grab onto the new work possible that I was able to create out of it. So there was something that I could see which was happening, which is that as soon as I had abstracted the images of different buildings I had shot before, these abstracted images started relating to each other in various ways. And also there were moments where I was not even photographing architecture, but it seemed like something, when abstracted further, it seemed like something that could be called a landscape, or it could represent the notion of a landscape or the notion of space, and actually did not come from these sources at all. So I became very interested in how architecture photography is kind of tricking the human eye into believing something when it is actually something entirely different. And why not explore that when I'm trying to photograph the work of architects here in India? So this is a project which is designed by Veer Mueller, which is the Ahmedabad University. And from this image, of course, I don't think anyone can. And if I look at it again after a few years, maybe even I can't say that this image is from that university. But and this is from the Ahmedabad University, and it was just a brief moment when the shadow of the leaves of the tree was creating a very interesting pattern on the fins of the facade, which is an iconic facade if any of you have ever visited the Ahmedabad University. And for me, this was a cool starting point to actually start taking a two-dimensional print of this photograph into a three-dimensional medium. So I went ahead and I took a print, which was a cheap ass print of this photograph, and I started cutting I started distorting, I started folding along lines and tried to make something that is three-dimensional and something that looks very far off from what the original building was in my mind. At some point, I arrived at some options which seemed like they did not belong to any space inside the original building anymore. And then my next thought was, what would be the outcome if I were to re-photograph this? So here I had taken a two-dimensional photographic print, converted into a three-dimensional model, and then reconverted it back into two-dimensionality, but this time all original meaning had been lost. My original intent had been lost, but what I got was something entirely new. So this was, after this, I was able to, with a clear thought in my head, imagine a lot more pictures that I shot while I was doing my masters in Spain, and also how then one picture can relate to another, even if they might not be from the same building. And to this end, I came up with an idea for an exhibition space in which architecture photography prints are displayed as larger than life sculptures, sometimes as silhouettes, like this silhouette in the image right here, superimposed against an image in the back, which belongs to a space I might have seen somewhere else, and what that composition between these two layers can do in terms of three-dimensionally experiencing them. As soon as a person visits an exhibition like this, they become part of a photographic exhibition in a very three-dimensional way. And it is so different from what I think photographic exhibitions are today, because most of them are displayed inside a four-walled room where all the photographs are put up on walls or suspended between the space, but there is no tactile three-dimensional experience that you can have with the photograph, which is to say that you cannot step inside a photograph, and that is what I try to do. So these are some images which were my conceptual idea for an exhibition like this, in which I might have taken a very solid element like a column from one image and superimposed it with the way you view the images behind it, and created these visuals for what the exhibition can look like. These are some more images of landscapes that I'd shot. So there is a monolith that I would have liked to bring out as a three-dimensional sculpture into the space of the exhibition. So there is a part of the image that comes out of the photograph and becomes a part of the maneuverability of the exhibition. And here there are two images which are completely different from each other, which is a brutalist sundial in Jaipur, which is the Jantar Mantar, superimposed with a stalactite cave from Goa, from Gokarna, which is a completely different kind of architecture. It is natural, it's not man-made, but somehow these two put together in a room that I imagine had a very dark ambience could be very interesting to view three-dimensionally. Here is a photograph that I took of the Jewish Museum, which is in Germany, put right next to an image of a natural rock formation in Hampi, which is one of the most prehistoric landscapes in the whole world. So to see that kind of shard jutting out of the Jewish Museum photograph in relation to the shard, or what looks like a shard in the rock formation image on the left side, which is from Hampi, for me that correlation three-dimensionally was super interesting. So that was one project, and I'll run through some other work as well, which I have been doing, which also relates to this theme. More recently, I have started looking at destroying my own photographs more, or trying to distort them even more. And I think the pandemic was the perfect time to do that. In quarantine, I thought of how everybody's online profile became more and more relevant, and people started posting more and more, online on their social media about their work. But sometimes it was about sharing work that had already been done, which was from a long time ago. And it seemed like there was a lot of work being posted online just to stay relevant. And this kind of caused a kind of identity crisis to me, because I felt a little insecure about the amount of work I was posting as an artist, and also whether I was putting up the same speed of creating new art as some other people in the fraternity, and whether the speed that I was taking is slow or fast, and also just getting frustrated by having to stay at home and not being able to create a new body of work. So the second project that I'd like to show is called Online Identity Crisis, which is my quest to stay relevant by putting up pictures of my own distorted work. So what I did was I had a lot of rough prints lying around of photographs that I had taken between the last year and when I started doing commercial photography in 2015. And these are prints that I have kept with myself and taken to architects to show them my portfolio when I was just starting out, and mostly have been shooed away sometimes. And there were moments where they really appreciated certain photographs. And then there are prints of photographs that have been published online and are very close to my heart. And I think that these are some special projects that I've been lucky enough to photograph. And I thought maybe it's time to not take these too seriously as I was doing before. And I just tore them up. And I know from when I was in school that this is how you recycle papers. So I went ahead and I recycled the photographs. So there are some photographs that I recycled that turned out to be really interesting objects, which is this new recycled paper. And every photograph created a tint in the new paper, which was unique to the original photograph. And that is the only remnant of the original photograph that you see in the new recycled paper that I created. So for me, this was really special because I had some nostalgia of what the original print was, but that was only in the color that the new paper was made of. So these are some images. This is from a building in Granada in Spain, which is an office building. This is from a project by Samira Rathod, which is a residence in Mumbai. And I just loved this spa room that she had created completely in China mosaic, and how the paper that it resulted in is also kind of pearly white, but it has that one black spot, which is actually an error. But the intention was to bring in one error to represent the cushion on the bed, and somehow it came through. This is from a project shot for Renaissance Architects, which is a cafe in Gurgaon. And somehow the mix of colors has resulted in something entirely different in terms of tonality, but I still found the paper and the shape and the color very interesting. This is from a project done by Mode Architects in Chennai, which is a residence on the outskirts of Chennai. And I took some black and white photographs of this project that did not make the cut for the final media set that was selected by both me and the architect. But these black and white images for me represented the project in a very different, very special way. So I was holding on to this print, but then I tore it up and I have some black and white paper now. This is from the Village Cafe, which is a cafe in Moradabad in Uttar Pradesh, India. It's designed by Portal 92. And somehow the result of all these earthy tones in the photograph, which in itself was a moment that I don't think I can repeat, has resulted in a paper that itself looks really earthy and vernacular, which is what the designer's intent was with selecting material and selecting stone. So I was happy that somehow it connected back to the original design, even though it doesn't connect so much to the original photo that I tore up. This is from a cultural center in Chennai done by Mode Architects, which again, it was a black and white image that did not make the final cut for the media set, but there were objects that I picked up from these locations that I embedded into the paper while making the new recycled paper, and that's how I ended up with this shape and design. And that's it for the second one. There is a third project, which is kind of an old project, which is a collaboration that I did with Samira Rathod, which was a really exciting opportunity that she presented me, was to do a traveling exhibition for something called the Death of Architecture, in which this does not exactly relate to how I imagine photography dying, but it is kind of the starting point in which I was looking at derelict spaces or heterotopic spaces as the starting point to even declare that photography was dead. And the location that we went to for this project, for this exhibition, is this small town, well, kind of a neo town or village on the fringes of Baroda, which is called Bhadran. And this town basically is almost a derelict landscape where there were a lot of Patel families and a lot of Gujarati families that used to stay and build very opulent houses by importing materials from all over the world, but then have shifted base to move to everywhere else except India, and these houses remain empty with traces of childhoods, with traces of people having lived here from a long time ago and leaving behind these objects, or maybe some people as caretakers and safeguarders of the space. So I'll just quickly run through these images. Samira's idea in this project was to not take any concept here as a literal reconstruction, because we did not want to celebrate nostalgia so much. We wanted to give a whiff of nostalgia from the images and from the objects that the studio created, but it was more like keeping a memento and then moving on, and not trying to latch on to these places and trying to fight for their survival, because they were kind of beyond the point where they could be salvaged anymore. So it was just a point where we said, okay, so this is where we pick up mementos. The photographs are going to be like mementos. And then with these photographs and with these objects, we move on. The entire town was surrounded by tobacco fields. So this shot is from inside a tobacco factory where they used to use this room as a warehouse to store bundles of tobacco, but now it was lying completely empty and in a very derelict condition. And it was interesting for me to photograph the tobacco fields from an aerial view, or to see the tobacco in a very different light in really huge opulent havelis stacked up in bundles and boris into really gaudily painted golden rooms. So this, as soon as you enter the room, you get a whiff of just tobacco all around you. But when you look at the ceiling, you might notice the most ornate ceiling designs that you've ever seen. So this contrast of how such a rich and lively town had reached its end and was now basically a giant warehouse of memorabilia and nostalgia was really interesting to photograph. This is the same ceiling that I was talking about. As you can see, the molding detail is really fine, and all this was hand painted with vegetable dyes which were locally available in Bhadran. So there were a lot of stories about all these havelis that we photographed that were very interesting to document. I'm sorry, I was trying to go full screen, but it somehow doesn't share screen in full screen. So yeah, that was Death of Architecture. I hope you guys are liking whatever I'm saying, because this is mostly a monologue right now. I've come to the final chapter of what I've developed till now, which has been one of the most recent exhibitions that I've been lucky to be a part of. And again, lucky to have collaborated with Samira on, which is Holding Water. This was part of an event held by Stir, which is a magazine based out of Delhi, called the Materiology 2.0, which was where they invited artists to come and create installations based on the theme